Had a good turnout tonight. We're hoping that we could have a good turnout of our area churches and folks from the community, and we have a good turnout. We are thankful that you're here. First of all, I want to have a word of prayer, and then I'm going to turn it over to Nathan House. He is our instructor tonight, and I know that he has some things to share with us tonight that will be very informative. So let's bow our heads and go to the Lord in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we want to bow before you tonight just to give you praise for the blessings of a wonderful day. And Lord, we thank you for bringing us into this place tonight. And Father, I would just ask that your hand and guidance would be upon what we're doing here tonight, Lord. I pray that the information that is presented, that it will be profitable. Father, we know that we're living in dark times. We know, Lord, that we're living in changing times. But Father, our consolation is this: you're in control of it all. And Father, we put our faith in you. And Father, I pray that you would give Nathan what he stands in need of tonight, Lord, as he speaks. Just give him the words that we need to hear tonight, and just bless this presentation. These things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Good evening. Y'all doing all right this evening? Good. I'm glad to hear that. My name is Nathan House. I just want to introduce myself very briefly. I'm a reserve and auxiliary deputy sheriff with the Lonoke Sheriff's Office. Hadn't been doing this for a whole long time, but have enjoyed it a great deal. I'm also a constable up here in the northern part of the county. I see a few folks that probably voted for me at one point in time, so thank you for voting for me. I'll tell you that as well. A couple other things about me. I'm originally from Arkansas. I graduated at the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville, went into the Army for about 4 years. I was an infantry officer in the U.S. Army, and got out of the military, went to work for the Target Corporation in the corporate sector for a number of years. And then moved back home. And then my full-time job is I run Arkansas Armory. We're a gun shop and an indoor range in Sherwood. I teach concealed carry classes there and that sort of material on a regular basis, and have for about the past 5 years. I'm a member of the security team with New Life Church in Cabot. That's one of the other things that I do. I'm in about, like I said, past year and a half, almost coming up on my second year with the Lonoke County Sheriff's Office. I'm pretty active with them. I've been through a lot of training with that organization. I'm currently a member of their ERT, which is basically the SWAT team. I'm told you got to pay Los Angeles Police Department some extra royalties or something to call yourself a member of the SWAT team. So they call it the ERT. So I get to do some of that in my spare time. I'm a graduate of several of these programs from ALERT. ALERT is an outreach of the Texas State University's it stands for Advanced Law Enforcement Rapid Response Team, and they travel around the country teaching a lot of different classes about active shooter. It's currently the FBI's standard for handling active shooter events in the United States. So it's a very prestigious program. It's a very good program. And I've been through several of their courses, included active shooter events response, exterior response to active shooter events, solo officer rapid deployment courses. There's a lot of tactical courses that we've had the opportunity to go through as part of ALERT's program. A couple things just housekeeping wise before we get started. This is a pretty informal deal, and we're going to be here about 2 hours. So if anybody needs to leave at any point in time, that's perfectly okay. We're going to cover some pretty difficult material, some stuff that's a little bit hard to digest, very adult level stuff, and we're not going to pull any punches about that. I know that what I'll tell you is that there's nothing in this presentation that's designed to shock anybody. There's nothing in here for shock value. So, but if there is something that is bothersome to you and you need to step up and leave, that's fine. Feel free to return whenever it's right for you. Restrooms are behind you. I think there's a restroom down this hall as well. And you'll notice where the emergency exits are around this room. There's the doors that you came in, but there's other ways that you can get out of this facility too. There's an exit there, and I see a sign here in front of us that has an exit sign, okay? It's one of the things I want you to get in the habit of noticing whenever you go into a place that you're unfamiliar with. Make sure that you're paying attention to where those emergency exits are. That's a critical thing that we can do. So if we need to get out of here, there's multiple ways to do so. Does that make sense? Great. I have a question, Ari. Yeah. Fantastic. Right down that hallway. Anywhere you see these red emergency exit signs, I'm sure that you can find an exit in that location. So what we're gonna talk about tonight, my notes disappeared on me. Where'd that go? Tonight's class is about disaster response. And well, before I jump into that, if you need to get up and use the restroom at any time, please feel free to do so. This is a pretty informal deal, and because it's about 2 hours worth of material, I'm probably not going to stop for a break as we go. Hop up and go, come back, don't worry about it. Just make yourself at home. Tonight's class is about disaster response, and we're going to look specifically at the disaster response for active shooter. But before we jump into that, we're going to look at disaster psychology and how people respond to disasters just in general. We're going to look at the law enforcement response to active shooter events and how we're going to be coming into that situation. And we're looking for a partnership between citizens and law enforcement so that as we show up, we're better able to predict what you're going to do, you can predict what we're going to be able to do, and we can work together better as a team in order to handle these situations in and of itself. I know most of you are here from churches, and I want to make this clear right off the bat. This is not a class designed to teach you how to run your church security teams, okay? I think church security teams are great. I think that they're an essential thing, and there's a lot of people that are thinking about the right sorts of things in terms of cameras and locks on doors during service, things that we can do to delay and slow somebody down, or maybe make that incident develop somewhere other than in the sanctuary, okay? I hate to tell you, but there's probably not a whole lot that anybody can do other than to immediately attack that problem if somebody walks into the sanctuary and starts shooting. Would you agree with that? Probably not much we can do other than get after the situation, start to defend ourselves, okay? But if we can make that problem develop somewhere else, that gives us time to think and time to react. So I applaud you for doing that, but I want to make clear this is not a church security thing. This is a thing that you can use for everyday life, whether it be in a church or if it's at a restaurant or you're at Walmart or anything else. It's a plan that you can use. So before we jump into that, we're going to look at a really important event that happened in, let's see if I can use my scroll wheel here. If you can go to that next slide for me, that would be great. I'm not getting it to respond here. There we go. We're working against ourselves a little bit. Okay, so we're going to look at an active shooter event that took place here in the United States that I know that we're all familiar with. Most of us can remember where we were whenever the Columbine incident took place. And Columbine was a very formative event in the way that law enforcement responds to these active shooter situations. And before Columbine, and even during Columbine, the law enforcement plan was, let's get law enforcement responders out there to that situation as quick as we can, and they need to set a perimeter. And then we're going to call SWAT, and SWAT's going to come in and solve the problem. But what we found out is, and a lesson that we've learned in blood, is that doesn't work. All we've done is allow these shooters free rein to move through these structures and continue on their goal of taking as much human life as they possibly can. When we've got people that are there on scene with a firearm that can go in and solve that problem, or at least help with the problem. Because law enforcement really has three things that we can do in order to stop these active shooters, these events while they're taking place. Number one, we can distract that active shooter. All right? If they're worried about their own physical safety, or they're worried about that law enforcement officer that's moving through that structure, probably wearing a vest or some type of bullet-resistant material, they're worried about their own life, and they're probably not as actively killing other people. The second thing that we can do is we can isolate them. If they're worried about not being able to move through that structure because we're going to get after them, they're going to limit the amount of area that they're going to be traveling through. Or number three, we can just solve the problem and we can neutralize the situation. And believe me, we're going to be trying to do that. So we're going to listen to the 911 call from Columbine that took place. Anybody remember the date? April the 20th, 1999 is when that took place. So, or 98, one of the two. I think it was 99. So we're going to listen to this 911 call. The call was made from a lady by the name of Patty Nielsen. And Miss Nielsen was in the library whenever the shooting took place. Of the 13 students that were killed, 10 of them were killed in the library. Okay, if you would click on that for me.
Jefferson County 911.
Yes, I am a teacher at Columbine High School. There is a student here with a gun. He was shot out a window. I believe one shot. I've been
Columbine High School.
I don't know what's in my shoulder. If it was just the last week or what.
Okay, has anybody been injured, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And the school is in a panic. And I'm in the library. I've got students down under the table, kids. Heads under the table. Kids are screaming. Some of the teachers are, trying to take control of me. We need police here.
Okay, we're getting them there.
Police here.
Who is the student, ma'am?
I do not know who the student is.
Okay.
I saw a student outside. I was in Holden. Oh, dear God. Okay. I was on Holden. I saw a gun. I said, what's going on out there? And she said, oh, it's probably because of the protection. She told me it's okay. I said, well, I don't think that's a good idea. And I went walking outside. I said, damn. See what was going on. He turned the gun straight at us and shot. And my God, the window went out. And the kid standing there with me, I think he got hit.
Okay.
Something in my shoulder.
Okay. We've got help on the way, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, God.
Stay on the line with me.
Oh, God. Kids, just stay down.
Do we know where he's at?
I'm sorry?
Do we know where he's at?
Okay. I'm in the library. He's upstairs. He's right outside of here.
He's outside?
He's outside of this hall.
Outside of the hall or outside?
The hall.
Okay.
There are alarms and things going off now. Smoke. My God, smoke is like coming into this room.
Okay.
I've got the kids under the table here. I don't know what's happening in the rest of the building. Most of them smoking. I don't know. I'm sure someone has to be calling 911 beside
Yes, we've got a lot of people on. Okay. I just want you to stay in the line with me. We need to know what's going on.
Okay.
Okay?
I am on the floor.
Okay. And you've got the kids
in the
there?
library. And I've got every student in this library on the floor. You better stay on the floor.
Is there any way you can lock the doors?
Smoke is coming in from out there, and I'm a little
Okay.
The gun is right outside the library door, okay? I don't think I'm going to go out there.
Okay, you're at Columbine High School?
I got 3 children.
Okay, we got it.
Okay? I'm not going to go to the door to shut down the door, okay? I've got the kids on the floor. I got all the kids in the library on the floor.
We have paramedics, we have fire, and we have police en route, okay, sir?
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know. I can't believe he's not out of the woods. He just keeps shooting and shooting and shooting.
Okay, yeah, we've got a police officer on scene.
I thought it was.
Okay, just try and keep the kids in the library calm.
Yeah.
Is there any way you can block the door so no one can get in?
I do not.
Okay.
I guess I can try to go, but I mean, he's right outside that door. I'm afraid to go to the door.
That's okay.
That's where he is. I'm afraid to go there. Okay.
That's okay.
Okay. I told the kids to get on the floor. I told them to get under the table. All of the children are on the floor under the table. Yeah, they're all under the table.
Okay.
And
as long as we can just try and keep...
No one's saying a word.
Okay, as long as we can keep everyone there as calm as we can.
I hear some yelling out there going on right now.
Yeah, we've got alarms going off now as well.
Yeah, there's alarms. This room is filled with smoke.
Okay.
Okay.
Keep everyone low to the floor.
Yeah. Yeah. Everyone's up. Okay. Everyone stay on the floor. Stay on the floor. Stay under the table. Okay. I don't know.
Okay, I know. Just.
I don't know. I didn't. I said, what is that kid got? He was outside at the time, and I was on call duty. Oh God. And he's trying. He's like, woo-hoo-hoo.
I know.
The things that are being shot off. I do not know who the student was. I don't even. I saw him. He was wearing black. He didn't look very large. Male student. He was out there shooting. It looked like he was pointing out and shooting. And somebody, I said, what is that? I said, what's going on out there? He said, I can't say. It's probably their video production. You know, they do these videos.
Right.
And the kids, I said, well, that's not, a play gun, a real gun. I was going out there to say no. And I went, what? Oh, my God, that was really close. That just rattled me.
Okay. What's your name, ma'am? Patty?
Do you think Miss Nielsen had ever thought about what she might do in an active shooter event before the situation happened? She's a school teacher. Of course not. This is something that's just unthinkable that most of us hadn't thought of. But that's the world we're living in today, is that these things need to be thought of in advance, and they need to be taken very seriously, because what we see is that this is a trend that is continuing, and it's continuing to accelerate. And we're going to look at that as we go through tonight. I mentioned earlier that SWAT's response, or the law enforcement response, was to set a perimeter and wait for SWAT to come. That's not going to work anymore. And we're starting to send people into that situation now. And all those big bucks we've been collecting all the years, it's time to earn our paycheck that day and start going into these structures and dealing with that problem. So that's one of the things that's going to change, that had to change in law enforcement because of this. But the citizen response has got to change too, and how we deal with it. What were some suggestions that were made from the dispatcher to Ms. Nielsen that she could do in that situation? Go lock the doors. She didn't want to do that. Why not? Because she was afraid that she's going to die. She's got 3 kids, and she's worried about those kids, and that fear took over. Do you think that Ms. Nielsen, knowing that she could have potentially saved 10 lives, may have gone and went ahead and locked the door? I think she probably would have. Now, this is not going to be a class about blame. I want to make that clear. But we're going to look at people's lives, and we're going to look at what they did that worked, and we're going to look at what they did that didn't work. Because if we can't learn the lessons that were paid for in blood through these people's lives, then I think that we're doing them a disservice. And so we're going to look at it very soberly, and we're going to see what they did well and what they didn't do well, and we're going to talk about what works and what doesn't work. So Texas State University has looked at this program, and they have done research-based work in determining what causes people to live in these types of situations and what causes people not to. And it keeps going back to this 3-tier strategy of avoiding the shooter, denying the shooter access to your location, and then preparing to defend yourself. Okay? These are 3 different strategies, and they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. There's a thought process that they can follow, but these are all 3 effective strategies that work, and you're just going to have to pick the right strategy for the circumstance, because the circumstance is going to be different every time, nearly. We're going to show you this video. It's a video that was put on between Texas State University's alert program and Walmart. It was a private, public, corporate situation, and this is the active shooter plan that is being shared across Walmart at a corporate level. This is what they use. What I'll tell you also is that if you want to watch this video, or if you want to share this video with anyone that's out there, you can do so at avoiddenydefend.org, and I will write that. I will give you that web address again at the end of the presentation tonight. But if you want to rewatch it or share it with a neighbor or something, avoiddenydefend.org, and you can watch this video as well. So if you would click on that video for me, and we'll watch it.
What's your emergency? There's a gunman inside the store. We need help now.
Do anything last weekend? It was very nice, wasn't it?
Right about is the new system enhancement. What's going to be the solution by the time we...
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. Actually think he's got an he's got a truck. I don't know if your daughter would be interested.
There's a gunman inside the store. He's shooting the place up. We need help now.
Issues that we found. Okay, Emily, see what that is. See what's going on. Just let us know what you find out. With a gun. Against the wall. Lights. Lock it.
Right down. There you go. You're safe for that.
This guy with the gun is shooting. Look.
James, we don't have to.
No, look.
Run! To the right, to the loading dock. Come on, this way.
Oh, no, come here.
Yeah, in here. The gunman's coming.
What are we gonna do?
We're gonna have to defend ourselves.
I can't do this.
You're gonna see your daughter tonight, okay? We are all going to go home tonight, all right? We have a right to defend ourselves. Get the gun! Get the gun! Hey! Hold him down! Yes, we're all going to go home. Everybody's going home. Yeah.
If you ever have the misfortune to be in an active shooter event, you deserve to survive. In our research, we have found that the actions that potential victims take during these events are critical to their survival. We have identified 3 options that have proven effective in many events. These are: avoid the attacker, deny the attacker access to your area, defend yourself. It is a personal decision, but you have a right to do so. Avoiding the attacker starts with being aware of your surroundings at all times and knowing what is going on around you. If you see or hear something that looks suspicious, take action. For example, the stalker took immediate and effective action to protect himself when he observed the shooter pulling out weapons from the bag. Others, however, hesitated, and this hesitation can cost them valuable time that they could have used to get away from the threat. If you hear something that is, or could be, gunfire, start trying to get away from it as soon as possible. Gunfire has a distinctive sound. Inside of buildings, the sound can be muffled or distorted. A single loud bang could be a person dropping something, or even thunder. But repeated loud bangs are much more likely to be gunfire. Additionally, look at the reaction of others. Are they startled or scared? Are they running? What are they saying? Any one of these events individually may create denial, but when put together, should create a heightened awareness and stimulate an immediate response. It is important that you know how to get out. The situation will be chaotic and rapidly changing. In general, you will want to go to the nearest exit. But you must also understand that the closest exit may not be accessible or safe to use. If this is the case, go to a different exit. While avoiding the threat, consider the uses of cover and concealment. Cover offers protection from gunfire, while concealment minimizes your exposure to the attacker. Try to keep objects between you and the attacker. If you can't avoid the attacker, sometimes the best option will be to deny the attacker access to your location. In many locations, this can be accomplished by closing and locking a door, such as they did in the meeting room. Locking the door has proven effective in many attacks. If the door does not have a lock, you can place heavy objects in front of it. Remember, barricades work best if the door opens toward you. If it doesn't, use things that are readily available, such as straps, belts, or objects that can be used to block or secure the door to make it difficult for the attacker to enter the room. This may at least slow the attacker down and give you time to identify alternate means of escape, such as adjoining rooms or windows. When attempting to deny access to your location, you want to make it appear that there is no one in your area. Lock doors, turn off the lights, silence your phones, and get out of sight. Your attempt to deny the attacker access to your location might fail.
The gunman's coming.
What are we going to do?
We're going to have to defend ourselves.
Have a backup plan about what you will do. In many cases, this may be to defend yourself. You need to be in a place where you can act if the attacker comes into your location. In most rooms, you will line up against the same wall that the door is on, near the door so you can react, but not directly in front of it. If you are unable to avoid or deny, your best option may be to defend yourself by using whatever is available. In a situation where someone is attempting to kill you, you have the legal right to defend yourself. Attack weak spots such as eyes, throat, and groin. Fight to the best of your ability and do not quit until the attacker is stopped. This is what the workers in the warehouse did when they were unable to avoid the attacker and felt their lives were in immediate danger. Whatever option you choose, call 911 as soon as you are in a safe location. Provide any information that you know. The operator will ask you a lot of questions. If you don't know the answer, don't guess. Just say you don't know and only state the facts.
I'm not sure. There's 3 of us in the room. We're on the...
There's a guy with a gun. He's shooting.
This will be a complex situation, and we can't tell you what you should do in every case. What we can do is provide you with information about the options that we have found to be most effective for surviving these attacks. The ultimate choice is yours. What you do matters. Avoid the attacker. Deny access to your location. Defend yourself. Law enforcement will be entering a chaotic scene with limited information. Their first priority will be to stop the threat to your safety. The police may not know where or who the threat is. Listen and comply with their commands immediately.
Put it down, sir. Put it down. Both of you on the ground.
Police are trained to look at people's hands to assess threats. Do not have anything in your hands that could be perceived as a weapon, such as a cell phone.
Show me your hands, sir. Show me your hands. Move to us. Everybody, keep your hands up, please. Walk out the door.
If told to do so, stay where you are and do not make sudden movements. Again, follow all commands. Remember, what you do matters. Avoid the attacker. Deny access to your location. Defend yourself. Remember, ADD. You can survive.
happen to any of us. So keep that in mind. I had a silly situation happen last night. I was standing around. We were getting ready to do one of these active shooter classes, and a guy comes in, and I meet him and introduce myself, and I'm kind of talking to him, and I smell what I thought was the smell of alcohol in his breath last night. And I'm like, it's a Wednesday night, it's a church thing, this is all church stuff going on. Nah, surely this couldn't be. And he's maybe diabetic. I talked to a guy earlier in the day that was diabetic, and surely this guy's not coming to church inebriated. Well, I started getting heckled by this guy in the middle of the presentation, and I'm like, are you kidding me? And then so, yeah, fireworks and all that. And he ended up leaving the presentation. And at the end of it, I was talking to the chief of police in Carlisle and a state trooper, and he's like, man, that guy was 3 sheets to the wind. I'm like, I knew it. I should have said something at first. But the thing was, I was going through normalcy bias, right? Like, I was the one that was in denial of that situation, because the fact of the matter is I sensed something that I knew that the guy was probably intoxicated. But here we are, it's church, it's Wednesday night, surely that's not going to be the case. So we're all susceptible to this. It's a normal human reaction that we go through some denial. And so that's what we have to do, is we have to recognize that. Another reason that we go through this denial is because we don't know what to do. And we look to other people in situations that we're unfamiliar with to figure out how to do what we're going to do. I'll give you another example. Let's say that you go to a dinner party. It's a fancy dinner party. You've got all these cups and plates and forks and spoons and stuff, and you don't know what to do with. Well, a really common strategy that people employ is that they'll look to somebody else and what fork are they using? And we'll do the same thing. We tend to look to others and react based on that. And that's a bad thing whenever it leads to denial, but it's also a good thing because it shows that if one person is doing something correct, then other people are likely to follow along. We don't have to train everybody in Ward or Greenbrier or Cabot or whatever else on this active shooter stuff. But if you guys are doing the right thing, other people are going to see you doing the right thing and take similar action. So that's one of the things that makes it so important for you to be here tonight. What that is that's called social proof. And I'm going to show you a quick video about that. This is a situation that a little study that they did in England where people they had actors that were acting like they were ill. And you see these rules that social groups develop very, very quickly about, hey, don't get involved. And so we'll watch that real quick and see if that.
Plays like this street in New York City. If you were unfortunate enough to be the victim of a crime or taken ill unexpectedly,
like this street in New York City. If you were unfortunate enough to be the victim of a crime or taken ill unexpectedly, you might think that surrounded by all these people, someone would intervene. After all, isn't there safety in numbers? Psychologists say no. Research suggests that often a victim is less likely to receive assistance when surrounded by a group rather than a single bystander. When people are in a crowd, it's easier to pass the buck. It's what psychologists call the diffusion of responsibility. Liverpool Street Station in London, a busy thoroughfare for commuters. Unknown to these passers-by, Peter is an actor. As part of an experiment on bystander apathy, he's pretending to be ill.
Help. Help.
How long before he gets help?
Please, somebody. Help. Help me, please help me.
Helping would be inconvenient or even risky. He lies there for more than 20 minutes and no one raises an eyebrow.
Please, somebody help me.
It's always very distressing to watch situations like this where people are obviously suffering and no one's actually helping them. But what we have here is two conflicting rules. One is the rule that we ought to help, and the other is the rule that we ought to do what everybody else is doing. And here you have effectively a group of strangers who are exerting the pressure not to intervene, not to help. And it's very difficult to rebel.
Ruth, another actor, takes Peter's place. How long before she receives help? Four minutes later, and 34 people have passed without stopping.
Well, people don't really want to know. They just haven't got the time. Well, they have got the time, they just don't want to get involved.
Unwittingly, these strangers have silently formed a temporary group with a rule: don't get involved. They're afraid to stand out from the crowd and won't take action if no one else does. This woman has clearly spotted Ruth, but she conforms to the rule and does nothing. Watch what happens, though, when someone else helps.
You all right? You all right?
Yes, thank you.
Sure, you look a bit clicky, you know what I mean?
She suddenly finds herself in a different group with a new rule: to help.
You want to sit up?
She don't look well, does she?
You all right? Yeah. Yes, you are.
First I thought she was dead. Then I sort of checked to see if she was breathing or not. And I looked around and I couldn't believe that no one had noticed her, because there was a bloke sat there just absorbed in reading a newspaper.
This time, Peter's dressed as a respectable gentleman. Now that his dress is in keeping with those around him, how long before he's rescued?
Hello, sir. How are you today?
I'm all right.
6 seconds. She even calls him sir, and suddenly everyone's a good Samaritan.
Do you suffer from epilepsy?
No.
Why you're lying on the floor in the rain?
Because he's part of the right group, everyone wants to help.
I would just hate to be in his position of feeling ill and nobody helping and walking past, so we'd just like to check that he was okay.
It makes a big difference whenever a few people start doing the right thing. It helps us move, it helps us and it helps others move past that stage of denial into a stage of deliberation where we can start making decisions about how to get out of a situation or how to prepare to defend ourselves. We can face the reality of that situation with our eyes wide open. That moves us into the deliberation stage, and that's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing. Because once we realize what's going on, we've got fear that's entered the equation, okay? Something bad is happening, and now we have to decide what we're going to do in a state of fear or even panic, okay? So as we go through this deliberation process, we have to understand that stress is going to enter the equation. Okay, right now we're all at what we would call a white level of stress. Just our heart rate is about at 60 beats per minute. We're mostly rested, mostly calm. You're listening to what I'm saying. You're definitely in the human cognitive side of your brain thinking about what I'm telling you. Well, as stress increases, we get into that yellow level of range of our stress, which is up about 90 beats per minute and higher. When we get to that level, we start experiencing some different physiological things that are going on. Blood starts getting shunted away from our extremities and back towards the core of our body in order to protect us, okay? We start losing some fine motor skills whenever that stress increases a little bit. As stress increases even further and we get into that red range, our heart rate can jump up to above 120 beats per minute. And when we get to that 120 beats per minute and higher, we've definitely lost a lot more of our ability to use our fine motor skills because of the blood that's rushed back towards the core. But we've gained some things too in that process. That's when adrenaline really kicks in, and we're able to do some things that otherwise might be a little bit superhuman. Okay, people can take bullets and survive that sort of thing. Really, at those levels of stress, we can. We're stronger. We're faster at those levels. Okay, so it's a problem because we're reacting to things. We're not able to think and cognitively process as much. But there's some advantages that are there too if we've made good decisions leading up to that point. As stress continues and we get into this gray level of stress, up about 150 beats per minute and higher, and when we get to that level of stress, some of us have experienced this several times. You ever been in an automobile wreck where it seemed like everything slowed down a lot, and you could remember everything happening? It seemed like it happened a lot slower. It's called time dilation. We start experiencing that at those levels of stress. We start experiencing a thing called auditory exclusion. People have been in gunfights and the gun will go off 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times, and they would not have heard the gun go off. Why? Well, because blood is really rushed away from your ears into your core, and you did not hear the gun go off. People can be screaming at you and you not hear them because of auditory exclusion. Or we have tunnel vision, where your vision narrows down and all you're able to see is just what's right in front of you. So that's what we start having at about that 150 beats per minute. And our ability to make good rational decisions at that point is pretty well gone. We're making instinctive reactive decisions if at all. Up above 175 beats per minute, we're into that black zone, and most human function is pretty well shut down at that point. People start voiding their bladders, they void their bowels. There's not much of a great response that we can have at that 175 beats per minute because the stress level is just simply too high for us to be able to manage that. So we have two different ways that we deliberate with things in our mind. We have a human side of our brain, which is that ability to reason, to process information, to be rational, to think about different alternatives, okay? That's the human side of our brain. It's great because it leads us to make good decisions every day, but the problem is it's slow. Now, on the other side is that instinctive side of our brain, the lizard side of our brain. It's the instincts that we all have. It's emotional, it's quick, it's reactive. It happens automatically. You don't have to stop and think about the responses that your lizard brain tells you what to do, which is generally one of three things: either to fight, to flee, or to freeze, okay? Those aren't necessarily bad reactions, and what's cool about that is that we can program those reactions to be more effective, but we have to engage the human side of our brain first in order to make this fight, flight, or freeze work better. And I'll explain that a little bit more as we go. A lot of that comes with scripting things out in your mind in advance, or practicing can make a big difference there. For instance, tonight when I said, that, where are our emergency exits at? We identified all those, okay? We know the way that we came in. There's an exit there, there's an exit back here. So if something were to happen and a bad guy were to come in that back door and we had to find another way out, so you're thinking, I've got to run. Well, now you've at least thought about where those exits are in advance. So that response that we get to flee may save our life, but instead of just the way that we knew to get out of here, we've got other options that are available to us. This is going to be a little bit hard for you to see up here on the screen, but this is a diagram of a place called the Station Nightclub in Rhode Island. Does anybody remember the Station Nightclub event that took place in Rhode Island? Happened February the 20th of 2003. I remember that because my wife back there was giving birth to my daughter the day before, and this was an event that happened the day after she was born. What happened at the Station Nightclub? Pyrotechnics, right? Anybody remember the name of the band that was playing? Great White. Okay, good. Yeah, this happened in West Warwick, Rhode Island. A band by the name of Great White was playing, and they were using pyrotechnics that were made for an outdoor venue inside a nightclub, inside a packed nightclub. Okay, what we see, and it's kind of hard to see up there in the top right-hand side of the screen, is where the band was playing on the stage. You then got some pyrotechnics that went off. The structure caught fire, and the fire spread basically from the stage towards the front of the building. You've got 4 different exits there. The number one exit was the way that they came in. And what you see is there's an entrance hall kind of here in the middle of the building, and you go in and then you turn right, and then you're into the main entrance, or you're into the main dance hall. Well, it's great for getting people into the structure, but it's not a great way to get people out of that structure in a hurry. Okay? The second exit that you've got is one that's off of the kitchen that probably no one is able to see at that point. It's just employees would have known about that. Number 3, there's a main bar area. There's an emergency exit there. And then number 4 is an exit back behind the stage, all right, that generally wasn't accessible to the public. There were 2 problems with that exit. Number 1, a fire pretty well happened there and shut that one off. And number 2, there was a bouncer that was guarding that exit saying, sorry, you can't use that exit because it's for the band only. Well, I understand that's the rule, but it's generally the rule that the place not be on fire, right? And we have a lot of these unwritten rules that we have in our life that kind of maintain normal order in society, like don't break windows. But guys, there's a time that we break windows to get out of stuff, right? Are there windows in this structure that could have been broken to get out of? Anybody see? Well, along the kind of the bottom right-hand side of the screen, you'll see there's a bank of windows there that are kind of, there's some red that are outlined there. There's windows there. There's windows in the bar area. There's windows back in an office area there too, okay? Only a couple of these windows were broke in that main area just off the bar, most close to the entrance and exit, okay? But the problem is, and what happened at the Station Nightclub is everybody came in the main entrance, and very, very few people knew of any other way to get out of the structure. And so when the fire spread, even though they were moving in the direction opposite of where the fire was, that exit quickly became clogged with people, and they had no other way, they didn't know any other way to get out of that structure. And they didn't think to break windows and go out that way. We're gonna watch a video of that real quick, of how quick that spreads on that fire. Let's see if I can get it going. just how quick this sort of thing can happen. This is a diagram that was used by the West Warwick Police Department to do basically body recovery after this fire. What you see on this is the exit shows 31 people, 31 bodies were found and recovered from the main entrance exit of that structure. Because that's the only way people knew to get in and out of there. Crowded up around it in this pool area, near where that big bank of windows was, a huge long bank of windows, almost that entire side of the building, there was 18 bodies found right there. Because they didn't know to break a window and be able to get out of that structure. Another 7 died just outside of there, apparently, I assume, pulled out of that part of the structure. Only 1 person died on the main dance floor. You've got 3 that died in front of windows and just steps away from an emergency exit in the main bar. You've got another 19 that probably tried to flee the smoke and everything back towards the main coolers, and they died very near to that emergency exit that was off the kitchen, and 1 person actually died in the kitchen. One thing that we can remember through this is you're out and you're with your families. Know that in most places it's code to have an exit off of a kitchen because it's a common place for a fire to start. So think about that. Okay, you're at a restaurant and you can't get out the entrance that you came in. Well, maybe you can go out through the kitchen and get out of that structure if you need to. So file that away. You may be able to use that information. And in the back, there was another 4 people that died in offices, again, right beside windows that could have been busted out, and people got out of those. And then another 3 people died in the bathroom. So it's about thinking about the options ahead of time before you ever get into those situations. And the same is going to apply to active shooters. Okay, if a situation were to develop, what can we do? Where do we go? What can we use for cover? What can we use for concealment in order to avoid the situation, in order to get out of it? The other thing that we need to do is we need to stay in that human side of our brain more for longer than the lizard side, that instinctive side. Calm yourself down. Get those stress levels down. Get that blood pressure down and get those beats per minute on that heart rate down. Calm yourself down. Tell yourself, calm down. Calm down. Combat breathing. Take a breath in. Hold it for a second. Let it out. Take just a minute to slow your breathing down. I wear an iWatch most of the time, and it's got a little heart rate monitor on it. I mean, you can sit there and tell yourself, calm down, slow my heart rate, slow my heart rate. And you can drop your heart rate 10 to 20 beats per minute very, very easily by just telling yourself to do that. So what that does is that gets your stress levels down just enough to be able to maybe think through the process just a little bit. What are my other options? What other options are available to me? Shift your emotions. I talked about that a little bit earlier, but how do we go from a place instead of being afraid of an active shooter or afraid of a situation to getting mad at that active shooter or getting angry at that situation? Okay? Being afraid of somebody is that cowering mentality. But if we get mad at the situation, that's an active emotion that may make us reach down deep and grab something and go into that fight. Okay? Don't be afraid to shift that emotion into something a little more active, a little more anger instead of the fear. And then staying fit. Guys, I'm not standing in front of you as the specimen of perfect physical fitness by any stretch of the imagination. But what I will tell you is that get out and go walk with your wife. My wife and I love going and walking around Magnus Creek and visiting with each other. It's not the greatest exercise in the world, but it's better than sitting at home watching TV. So get out and go walk with your wife, or your husband. Y'all share about what's going on through your day. Get to talk to each other. Do something. Do yard work together. Go swim if you like to swim. Go play tennis if that's what you want. Find some type of physical activity and go do it, because it will keep your heart rate lower automatically whenever you get into a bad situation. Again, script these things out. What I mean by scripting things out? Well, looking around and figuring out where the exits are, figuring out where the windows are, what are our secondary exits that are available. If you get a chance, practice. Don't be afraid to practice a fire drill or practice an active shooter drill that you come up with for your location. But take that stuff seriously, because taking that stuff seriously makes a big difference. Who knows who Rick Rescorla is? Rick Rescorla? You might know who he was? Who's that? Yeah. Rick. That's right. He was a security guy for Dean Witter, Morgan Stanley during the incidents, the terrorist attacks at the Twin Towers. Mr. Rescorla was in the military. That is a statue. I think that statue is actually at Fort Benning, Georgia, if I'm not mistaken, where that one was. And and this plaque is there too because Mr. Rescorla participated in the Vietnam situation, the Vietnam War. And after Mr. Rescorla got out of the military, he went to go work for Dean Witter Morgan Stanley and became the head of their corporate security division at the World Trade Center. And in '93, when the bombings happened there, or before the bombings happened, he walked through that structure and said, okay, we've got here a symbol of capitalism. We think that we're going to be attacked by, we need to make plans as if we're going to be attacked by terrorists. And so he and a buddy went down and they started at the ground level and looked at the garage and said, you know, if I were a terrorist, how would I attack this place? And they said, well, we just drive a box truck right here through these unsecured doors up against these columns, set that thing off, and we'll topple one of these towers into the other one. So they went to the New York Port Authority, who was in charge of the World Trade Center, and asked for improvements to be done on that building. Well, it was going to be too inconvenient, or it was going to be too costly, and so none of the changes were made to put security up against, into that garage. And lo and behold, in '93, that's what took place. Terrorists drove in there and blew a bomb up, and just about succeeded in knocking the towers down. After that, they started taking Mr. Rescorla a little more seriously, okay? And what he recognized was, well, they weren't successful the first time. They're coming back. And we've made all these improvements at the ground level. They're not coming back from the ground. They're going to come back from the air. And so that was the prediction that he made. And so they installed lighting, emergency lighting, and they instituted quarterly evacuation drills for every employee, from the bottom level guy to the guy all the way at the top for Morgan Stanley Dean Witter. And they practiced every 3 months to make sure that people could evacuate that building if something terrible were to happen. And on 9/11, we know that something did happen. And every employee of Morgan Stanley Dean Witter got out of that structure. Over 2,700 lives were saved by Mr. Rescorla. And everyone got out except Mr. Rescorla, because he went back into the building and was helping others in the towers get out of there, because he took it seriously and others didn't take it seriously, and others lost their lives, and he was able to save thousands of people because of what he predicted and because he took this stuff seriously. So that's what we see. And once we make a decision on what we're going to do, are we going to avoid this situation? We're going to deny that attacker access to us? Are we going to defend ourselves? We need to commit to that decision decisively, right? If you've committed to the decision to defend yourself, just like what it showed in the video, it's time to commit to that decision. I'm going to show you a video here a little bit later about an attack that happened at a school board meeting in Panama City. And there was one very brave lady that committed the decision to go on the offensive, but she was by herself and she was outgunned and nobody else was there to help her. So it didn't turn into a decisive situation. But whatever you decide, be decisive about it. Make a stand. We saw that happen. There's 2 different airplane stories that go with this. United Flight 93, right? Look what those people did and how we venerate those people today. I mean, we look at them and think, man, these guys are heroes. They sacrificed their life, but how many thousands of lives did they save by being willing to sacrifice themselves for a greater cause? And guys, if somebody walks in this sanctuary right now, it's probably time that we get up and we go address the situation. I don't want to get shot. I know y'all don't want to get shot either, but I would rather a couple of us get shot than all of us get shot, right? So it's worth thinking about what that decisive moment looks like. The other situation, I'm going to play a little cockpit voice recorder for you for Captain Sully Sullenberger, right? The Miracle on the Hudson, remember that, when he landed that flight in the Hudson River? Listen to the calm in his voice, the determination in his voice, and he makes that decision. He weighs his options about, what are we going to do? What plan of action are we going to execute? And then listen how he goes about doing it.
Cactus 1539 hit birds through lost thrust on both engines, returning back towards LaGuardia.
Okay, you need to return to LaGuardia. Turn left heading up 220.
220.
Tower, stop your departures, got emergency returning. It's 1529. He bird strike, he lost all engine, he lost the thrust in the engines, he's returning immediately.
Cactus 1529, which engines?
He lost thrust in both engines, he said.
Got it.
Cactus 1529. We can get it to you. Do you want to try to land runway 13?
We're unable. We may end up in the Hudson.
All right, Cactus 15.9. It's going to be left traffic to runway 31.
Unable.
Okay, what do you need to land? Cactus 15.9. Runway 4 is available if you want to make left traffic to runway 4.
80, I'm not sure we can make any runway. What's over to our right? Anything in New Jersey, maybe Teterboro?
Okay, yeah, off your right side is Teterboro Airport. Do you want to try to go to Teterboro?
Yes.
Teterboro, Empire, actually, LaGuardia departure guy, emergency inbound. Cactus 1529, turn right 280, you can land runway 1 at Teterboro.
We can't do it.
Okay, which runway would you like at Teterboro?
We're going to be in the Hudson.
I'm sorry, say again, Cactus? Cactus 15.9, radar contact is lost. You also got Newark Airport up at 2 o'clock in about 7 miles. Eagle 54718, turn left thing 210.
210, 4718. I think he said he was going in the Hudson.
I promise you that guy didn't want to land an airplane full of people in the middle of a river, right? It's generally not the right, it's generally not good for your reviews, right? But he did, and he did a good job of that. And when he made that decision, that's what he's going to do. He went through and he executed the training that he knew how to do this, and he saved every life on that plane. And the same thing applies. When it's time to make a decision, you make that decision and you go with that decision. Because that 80% solution that you go all out with is going to be better than half measures in any decision that you make. Okay? Don't second guess yourself. Once you've committed to that decision, make it happen. Okay? Let's jump into active shooter situations a little bit more specifically. And now the federal definition of active shooter is one or more people attempting to kill people, and it can't be gang related, and there's a bunch of these caveats and all that. For our purposes tonight, I think, would you agree with me that's probably a fair enough definition? Okay, yeah, I think that works. So when we look at the active shooters, who they are, unfortunately, I can't tell you that you can look at an active shooter and tell who they're going to be. There's no profile, okay? What I will tell you is that the vast majority of them are men, about 96%, though there are women that have been engaged in this behavior too. A lot of times it's a husband and wife kind of a deal. There was an active shooter event in a Walmart where, unfortunately, the active shooter goes in, he begins to commit his crime. A good guy, a concealed carry licensee, goes to stop him, gets his gun out and goes to stop him, and unfortunately, the attacker's wife was behind him, pulls a gun out and takes the life of the good guy in that situation. Okay, what does that tell us? Well, it tells us that our spiritual fitness is important, right? That every day we've got to live our life right with our destiny. And if you don't have those questions worked out, I assume that most people do, given that you're in church. But if you don't, then there's plenty of good resources in this room in order to help you get there. So I'll leave it at that. We don't have a profile. What I will tell you is that these people have an avenger mindset, okay? They feel like that they've been wronged in some way by society or by some group or some individual, and for whatever wrong, they've decided they're going to go out and they're going to perpetrate this crime in order to get justice for whatever wrong situation that they've been part of. They are very determined people. They're very planful people. They are very committed to what it is that they're going to do. Most of them know that they're going to die from this. Many of them, most of them, I wouldn't say most of them, I would say 4 out of 10 of them end in suicide. And many others in somebody being shot, either by a good guy or by the police. So they understand that they're not going to make it through this situation. Most of them want to try to get as high a body count as they possibly can. Okay? That's why some of the deny stuff works, is what we're seeing in the research. Because if you're trying to rack up a high body count, well, could you just use your shotgun like what it showed in the video to blast the door open? Well, yeah, you could, but it might be a closet over there, or it might be nobody's in there. And if I'm wasting time trying to get in there, that gives the police or somebody else more time to get to me and respond. So if I can delay them, then if they find themselves delayed in that situation, they can't get that body count up as much as they'd like to do. So that's how that works. Now, we've got that avenger mindset. Okay, some of them are going to broadcast out there on social media, some of them are not. Some of them will leave a note, some of them won't. We saw that, obviously, that nobody left a note in Las Vegas, or, you know, they're still trying to pick all that mess up. But sometimes they do. Unfortunately, they look like everybody, all races, all nationalities, all creeds, is what we're up against. Now, I'm going to show you this map, and you'll see that the little dots, they're kind of hard to see on the screen, but the little dots are 0 to 4 people were killed in an active shooter event. Your medium-sized dots that are out there are 5 to 9 people that were killed in these events, and 10 plus in the bigger dots. You're going to see this screen start populating from the year 2000 up through about 2014. And you'll see where these active shooter events have taken place. You're also going to see it kind of accelerate as we get further in time. We're seeing more and more of these events happening. We're seeing them grow in number of fatalities, number of sizes that we have. Would you agree with me that it's probably a trend that's here to stay? Right? Between 2000 and 2014, we saw 179 of these events take place in our country. It's far more than what we hear about, far more than what we hear about in the news. Where these attacks are occurring, we're going to say commerce, give a great big bucket called commerce is where the vast majority, over 50% of them take place at. Commerce is lumped together in terms of, you know, your employer, at a store somewhere, in a warehouse, or in a church. All of those things are lumped into that commerce section. We've also got places of education. You know, that's your schools that you think about. The Virginia Tech. We're going to look at Virginia Tech before we leave tonight. Outdoor locations are kind of third on the list at about 10 or 15%. Obviously, that number will go up as they start including 2017 data, and then other places are about 10-12% of the time. About 55% of the time, the attacker has some connection to that location. Another 45% of the time, they have no connection whatsoever. How was the shooter in Texas at the church there? How was he connected to that church? He had an in-law there, right? He had an in-law. Thought maybe he was going into that situation to deal with that. Las Vegas, was there any connection to the shooter there? Kinda, right? I mean, he gambled at the hotel, it looked like. Does anybody remember what happened right before Las Vegas, about a week? Different hotels in different cities he looked at. What was the mass shooting event that took place just before Las Vegas? Anybody remember that? Church shooting in Tennessee. Okay, it was a guy that used to go to church at a church there in Tennessee, and then came back a couple years later. Murfreesboro. So, a lot of different active shooter events that are out there. 2009 active shooter event, Fort Hood. We saw Chattanooga, Tennessee, 2015. Started at a recruiting station, went to a naval yard. Obviously, 2017, Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm going to show you just after this. There's a quick video of the start of that active shooter event in Las Vegas. The reason that I show it is the concert's playing, and you hear the shooter start rattling off rounds. Okay, the band plays for a little while, and then it stops. The shooting stops. Watch the energy in the crowd. I mean, a few people are upset, but for the most part, people are still going through this period of denial. And there's a period of 37 seconds from when that last round is fired until when the next round fires, where people are pretty much not doing a whole lot. Right? That's not being critical of them. I've been to Las Vegas. Many of y'all have probably been to Las Vegas. And who knows if that's just sound coming out of Las Vegas reflecting off of the Mandalay Bay. They just don't know what's going on. But it's also a period of denial, like surely this can't be somebody shooting at us here. All right? The energy's pretty low. Then after that 37-second period, you're going to hear him open fire again. And the energy level picks up a little bit. People start realizing, wait a minute, something's not right here. And then by the third, they're in full-blown crisis mode trying to think about what happens. Okay? I would argue that if you're in the first volley of gunfire, there's probably not a lot you can do about that situation. Would you agree with me there? Probably not a lot we can do about that. But the quicker that we can move through denial and start into that, making a decision, that deliberation, and then decisive moment, the more likely we're going to be able to get out of that situation. So let's watch this video just briefly. I won't play the whole thing. If I can find it, there we go. And we will get you and then we'll skip it here in just a little bit. With that not playing real well, I'll try it one more time. If it's skipping around like that, I don't think we're going to get a lot out of it. Sounds like that's going to be the case. But again, like I said, what you're experiencing is gunfire goes off, everybody sits around for about 37 seconds, doesn't do anything. What I will tell you is that those folks did a good job of figuring out how to move under fire, right? And they very quickly figured out, wait a minute, wait till the shooting stops, and let's hide behind something until the shooting stops, then we move while he's reloading. And then we stop when he's shooting, and then we move while he's reloading, okay? That sort of thinking on your feet is the kind of stuff that guys do in Afghanistan, in Iraq, you know? And these people had to learn it at a concert. So, I mean, I admire them for that. You hear one of the ladies in the video, it's like, get down, get down. Well, that situation may not have been the best decision. And the reason is that you've got gunfire coming in at an angle, and we like to believe that bullets are going to strike a hard surface and then ricochet at a 90-degree angle, or like a pool ball would if you were, you know, playing pool at a pool table. It doesn't happen that way. And what we see is that when rounds hit the ground, they tend to deflect and they follow that surface just about 6 inches off the ground. And so laying down in that situation probably put people's organs, their vitals, in direct path of those rounds. Probably not a good situation. Did they know that that was what was happening? Did they know that they were taking fire from an elevated position? Probably not. All right, we have to give that as a granted. But thinking about how we move and how we use cover and what the situation is can matter. If you're in a structure, one of the things they teach us whenever we're going through SWAT training is if you're entering a room, we can't have our backs right up against the wall. We can't get up close to the wall. We have to fight off of the wall, because if a round hits that wall, it wants to strike the wall and then turn and follow the wall, okay? It'll stay about that, the rounds will stay about that far off the wall. So if I get off the wall at least that much and somebody's missing me, then at least those rounds are likely to go behind me somewhere. So get up off the wall, you know, moving through a structure like that is what I'm trying to say. Things you can think about if you have to move through a facility. Oh, Edmond, Oklahoma, real quick. I'll go back to that. 1986. What I'm just trying to say is that it's been happening a while. Anybody know we'll leave it there. Does anybody know what the significance of Edmond, Oklahoma was? Anybody know the phrase going postal? Yeah, that's where that kind of entered the public lexicon. So these things have been going on a long time, and even from the 60s, right? We saw that situation happen in Austin, Texas at the bell tower there. So these things have been going on a long time, but I think we'd all agree that they're accelerating. What we see in terms of the number of deaths that occur in these active shooter events is, first, how quickly the police arrive, okay? That is a direct determinant of how many casualties that are experienced there is how quick the cops get there, okay? The other factor that makes a big difference is the number of targets that are available to this shooter. And so if we can reduce the amount of target availability, then obviously more people survive. When we look at how quick the police can get there, the average response time in the United States is 3 minutes. Everybody's coming, okay? It happens here in Ward. Ward's coming, county's coming, state police are coming. Everybody's coming as fast as they possibly can in order to get there. I think this number is pretty dadgum solid. And I think most people would agree it's going to be hard to get the police there any faster than about 3 minutes, okay? That's a long time to give somebody free rein to run through a structure and do what they need to do, right? It's a long, long time. So if you hear this, moved past denial and moved right into that deliberation about what we do. Start making decisions, start acting as fast as we possibly can. That civilian response is what's going to matter. So what are our options? Okay, obviously we've talked avoid, deny, defend. We'll look at that. What about playing dead? What about hiding and hoping under a desk? This is a lady by the name of Christina Anderson. Miss Anderson was a student at Virginia Tech, and she was in one of the classrooms, and she's going to talk to you about her experience at Virginia Tech and what she lived through while that student or while that killer came into the classroom. And what I will tell you is that she was shot 3 times in that event, and she's going to describe it. I apologize. I know we're all church-going folks, but we're all adults in here. There's one bad word used in this. I think we can probably work our way through that, okay? So, the lady was shot 3 times. I think we'll give her this one.
So, this is pretty important. This day, I ended up sitting in exactly the same seat I always did, in the back right-hand corner on the right side of the class. What we don't know is at this time, someone is downstairs, and he's chaining all 3 doors shut. There's supposed to be desks there. Oh, you guys can see. We heard the first gunshots outside in the hallway, and my teacher, she opened the door. She immediately slammed it, and she said, call 911. And the second that door closed, he walks in. He walks in shooting. There's absolutely no time. He goes to the other side of the classroom by the windows. He's holding 2 guns. He doesn't say anything. He just starts going down the rows of people. It's very quick. It's very loud. It's very scary. We had these very shitty desks. I get on the floor. I put my knees under the chair, my stomach on the seat, hands overhead, eyes are closed. As the shots keep going, and it's, like I said, very loud, I can tell it's getting closer and closer. And I'm telling myself, brace yourself, your turn is going to come. Now, I didn't know what that meant. Like, I didn't think I was going to get shot, but I knew that something really serious was going on. And I knew for whatever reason that I should just play dead. He shoots me. The first time's in the back. And you'd be surprised, getting shot doesn't hurt that much because shock overtakes you, but it starts to like burn and really kind of seep in, and that's when it gets really uncomfortable. It's not pleasant. He leaves the first time, he goes across the hall, and while he's gone, cell phones are ringing, people are coughing, and the smell of gunpowder has like completely filled the room. Gunpowder is like this really sticky, pungent, warm smell, and it just makes you very, very thirsty. He comes back. Now, this time, the shooting is more intermittent. It's slower because he's looking to see who's alive. I remember telling myself to stop breathing because I can feel my stomach hitting that chair, and I'm saying, stop, like, he can see that you're alive. The third and final time, he killed himself in front of our classroom. When the police broke in, the first thing the guy said was, we have a lot of blacks in here. I didn't know what that meant, but when police sweep a crime scene, they have 30 seconds. If you're red, you're critically injured. If you're yellow, you'll live. Black means you're dead. In 9 minutes, he killed 11 of my classmates and my teacher. 32 people lost their lives that day.
Playing dead and hoping that these guys are going to be merciful is not a strategy that's going to work. We're going to have to get in a position where we can defend ourselves. Let's see, come on. Uh-oh. Oh, that's not good. So hiding and hoping that the situation is going to work itself out is not something that we need to take very seriously. We've got to be able to find other solutions that are out there and available to us. Something may be coming on. The next slide is going to show you there's a guy hiding underneath his desk. There's nothing in this room that's going to be resistant to bullets, right? I mean, there's nothing really bulletproof in modern consumer America construction, okay? Further, hiding underneath something, getting underneath the tables in that way, you don't have anywhere to go. There's no way to get out of that situation. You're in that situation, you're there, right? There's our guy hiding under the table in the right spot again. So, as we go into that deliberation, we're looking at our strategies of avoiding, deny, and defend, okay? Just like what we talked about in the video a little earlier. I'm going to run this one back just a second.
And for the technology, you'll notice it's on the chart that you have there, and it's part of the
plans that we have, the workshop we're going to have following this meeting. But
school board meeting in Panama City, Florida, in 2011. What happens is a gunman walks into that school board meeting and walks up to the wall, and he gets out a can of spray paint. And he says, I have a motion, and he spray paints a big V for Vendetta with a big circle around it on that wall. Is that normal behavior? That's a clue. I like to think, I want to get out of that situation if that happens. Okay? Fortunately, the guy says, everyone in this room needs to leave. Okay? And people don't leave immediately. Okay? You leave, you leave, you leave. You stay, you stay. He starts pointing people that are on this committee to stay and starts telling everybody else to leave. And watch what these ladies do. Grabbing their coat, grabbing their purse. There's one of them crawling out. You know, let's just get out of the situation. You've been granted an opportunity to get out of the situation. Get out, right? Leave. From there, he starts talking and interacting with the school board, and he says, "I'm going to die today." Right? He's made the commitment already that he's gonna die. All right, and he's mad, like I said, because his wife got fired from this school board. Okay, and then he gets into it with this guy that you see on the screen right now over how he got elected to the school board, and he said he wasn't going to raise taxes, and then this guy's arguing back and forth with him about taxes, about, you know, look, no, I said that we should have a sales tax because that sales tax is the only fair way to do that. Word of advice tonight: don't argue with a guy with a gun that's pointed at you. Right? Generally doesn't work out real well. He wins the argument right then and there. You know, you can think what you want, but let's not have a fight with him right there. Make sense? At least an argument with him in that situation. All right? Let's watch what happens. It doesn't end well for the gunman, I'll tell you that. That's the good news, but just be aware this is a pretty intense situation.
this would be the first step in that whole process. I have a motion. Everybody in this room behind that counter at the road. Please, certainly, Jimmy, no, the women can leave. And so, everyone else leave. Hey, sir. John, just let him talk. He's talking. John, go ahead. Ginger. No, she couldn't Ginger. Oh. Ginger.
May I help her?
Yes.
May I help her?
It's all right if you help her.
May I help her?
Fireball life. Sure, I don't know who you are. See, I'm going to die today. Bury my wife. Can we talk for a minute? No. Just a word in the person. Can I ask you a question? A word in the person. Can I ask you a question? Because I really don't know who you're talking about, to be very honest with you. I have no idea who you're talking about. She's fired. I believe that, because she said that, but what did she do? Come on in. Can you just talk to us a little bit about it? Where did she work at school? Just tell me some help. No, he's... Hey, how you doing? Boy, I guess you're the one with jobs. Come on in. No, I'm the school safety officer. Well, come on in. You got a real gun there? Come on in. Nah, we're gonna wait, man. He probably doesn't have it. Tell me what she did. They're calling the police as we speak. I know that, but tell me. You're part of it. Part of what? Scam. Sir, I don't know what you ran. Just to stop taxes, okay? You said we don't need no taxes. No, that's plenty of money. Then as soon as you got the school system, then you turned around and said, oh, now we need to have some sales tax again. I said we needed to have some sales tax from the very beginning. I campaigned on that. Oh, yes, I did. You can look on the material. I said from the beginning, the half sales tax is the most equitable way because everybody pays it, not just property owners. No, see, here's what I don't want to happen. I don't want anybody to, just listen to me for a minute. I don't want anybody to get hurt, and I've got a feeling that what you want is the cops to come in and kill you because you're mad, because you said you're going to die one day. But why? This isn't worth it. This is a problem. Please don't. Please don't. Please. I'm going to kill
So, the good news is, every round that was fired missed except the rounds that came from the good guys towards the bad guy. All right, he was shot once, went down, tried to return fire for a couple rounds and save the last round for himself. Okay? It was almost like these people didn't take this situation seriously, right? A lot of arguing back and forth. Is that a real gun there? Or is that, it was, this situation was really happening. And in that shooter's mind, it was a very real situation, okay? So, if given the opportunity, avoid the situation. Get out of there as soon as you can. Know where your exits are. And call 911, but only when it's safe to do so, okay? If 911 is great, and we got to get people on the way, but they're not going to help you stay alive for the next 15 seconds, all right? Do what you have to do first, and then try to get 911 on the phone whenever it's safe to do so, okay? But think about how you get out of that situation. Well, and a lot of people, again, we go back to that social proof thing when we talk about when people are in denial. If other people see you leaving, you're going to lead people out of that structure too. You can save lives by getting people out and not becoming targets. Okay? Not only are you going to be more likely to go home at the end of the day, but think about the resources that you're not going to be drawing on by removing yourself as a casualty. If you get shot, not only you got to worry about your life, but it takes blood units to fix you, it takes trauma surgeons to fix you, it takes ambulances to get you there, it takes somebody to carry you out of there. Those are all resources we could otherwise be dedicating to people that were injured. So think about how to get out of that situation if you can do so if at all possible. Teachers, if there's any teachers in here, there's a real problem with, I don't want to send kids out of the building, I don't want to send them away because of accountability, right? Accountability is a myth. And if the certainty exists that people are going to die because there's a gunman there, or they may get kidnapped by somebody if we send them out away from the building, I'll take the chance of them potentially getting kidnapped by running to a neighborhood, because that ain't going to happen, right? So get people out of that structure as fast as you can. Think about your secondary exits, right? If the doors are unsafe, look for windows, other ways to get out of there. So the other strategy, denial, lock doors, okay? Turn the lights out and get out of sight. Well, that may not be reasonable in your churches, or maybe it is, because a lot of you have rooms for the kids, right? You know, we have Kid Life at our thing. Maybe these doors get locked and kids get up against that wall, the same wall that the door is on, but down further, okay? You know, make it harder for people to get in there, and then at least if you're closing and locking that door, barring that door, maybe you can get kids out a window or something else. So think about that beyond just the sanctuary. The sanctuary gets a lot of attention, but there's other kids' rooms and things to think about as well. Lights out, lock the door, be out of sight. Barricade the door, okay? The heavier stuff, the better. The more stuff, the better. Get some door stops. If your doors don't lock, just get some door stops and jam them in there. That's a good way. If the door is an outward opening door, get on those door closers with a belt, or like what we saw in the video. Anything that we can do to make it more difficult for someone to be able to enter that room, okay? It's going to give you time to think, react, and even plan to defend yourself from in there. And so, just like you see there, that ropes, tactical cinch that door down, try to keep it closed as best as you can. We're going to see that actually work whenever we start looking at Virginia Tech. When we get into the defensive thing, we're talking about positioning ourselves to grab the gun. Just like what these guys are showing, if a guy's coming in that way, you know, through this door, maybe we get on the side and he leads through there. Now we've got the element of surprise and we can go defend ourselves, right? Now, there's different ways to defend ourselves. One way would be with a stapler, like what we saw in the video. Another way to defend yourself might be with a concealed handgun, right? So would I rather defend myself with a stapler or a concealed handgun? Well, obviously with a firearm. So, but that's me. Okay, each of your churches are going to have to develop your own policy about, you know, and you've got the legal right to determine who can carry in your churches and who cannot right now. That will be changing in Arkansas after the first of the year when the enhanced carry comes out. The new enhanced carry law will allow anyone that has an enhanced carry license to carry in your church without your permission unless you post a sign. So if you post a sign, you cannot, they can't carry even with an enhanced license. Here's my take on signs. There's two groups of people in this world. This is Nathan's opinion. This is not official doctrine here as part of this. But there's two groups of people in this world: rule followers and rule breakers, right? Okay? And so my rule followers are the ones that are going to be worried about signs, but they're not the people that I'm worried about, okay? Murderers are by definition rule breakers, and they probably don't care about your sign either, okay? Think about that. Make your own decisions based on that, okay? We're getting ready to jump into talking about Virginia Tech. It looks like our system's rebooting a little bit. Let me see real quick on my thing if we can talk about some other stuff while we're worrying about that. The Chattanooga, defending ourselves, where are we at? What I will say is when we get into the defending, it's really easy to be afraid. Again, we're back to talking about how we shift that emotion from fear into anger, into directed action, okay? We don't want it to be in that situation like Ms. Nielsen was in, where we're afraid to go to the door. We're afraid to take action. We need to get angry and go take action, okay? None of us want to fight, but there's a time and place that we all have to fight. And we have to understand that just like Christina Anderson can get shot 3 times and still live through that situation, you know, you don't magically just disappear in a puff of smoke if you get shot. Okay, you can live through that experience, but you've got to understand that you can live through that experience, and a whole lot of that is mindset. Okay, there's a slide that I'd show you of Lieutenant Brian Murphy, who was shot 15 times. He's a police officer, shot 15 times at the Sikh temple shooting that happened, and his thought process was, I'm not going to die out here on this parking lot. I'm going home to my family and my kids. And so by that mentality and staying in the fight and being willing to stay in that fight can carry you through at the end of the day. So don't give up. Don't quit just because the situation, you know, may look a little bit hopeless. Stay in there. Stay in that fight. Don't be afraid to stay with it. The next couple of slides are going to be Virginia Tech, and I probably need to get those back before we get going with that. I want you to also think a little bit about the EMS delay that's going to be taking place in these active shooter events. People are going to be injured. Okay? People are going to be hurting. And we've got to think through, you know, maybe is there training that you can get beyond that can help you with some of the medical responses that you're going to need to have whenever we're on the other side of one of these active shooter events. Tourniquets right now are saving people's lives. There's a mythology that has surrounded tourniquets for years and years about, well, you know, if you put it on, it's going to cause somebody to lose a limb. That's not what we're seeing anymore with modern advances in medical technology. Tourniquets are great. You want to get them on as high as you can and as tight as you can. They're not going to like having it on there, but it's going to, basically, you crank those things off until the blood stops flowing. It's saving people's lives. It's the reason that we're seeing a lot more of our national treasure come back home from Iraq and Afghanistan. It's because tourniquets are saving lives. Y'all remember the Power Ultra Lounge shooting that took place in Little Rock? There were 5 tourniquet saves by Little Rock police officers at the Power Ultra Lounge. They saved 5 lives with tourniquets. Okay, will a belt work? Yeah, it can. Will, you know, bed sheets or T-shirt or anything else? Use what you have. But I really, really like an approved tourniquet, a TCCC approved tourniquet. This is what's called a CAT-T, and the way that they work is it's basically an elastic band with a stick on it that's called a windlass, right? And we can open this thing up, and you get them on there, as high as you can and as tight as you can. You wrap it around, twist this windlass, and it shuts the blood flow off. Okay? These things are less than $30. You can get them on Amazon. Make sure you're getting the real one, and they work. Okay? Most of your police officers are carrying these things around. This kit that I've got, this has not been purchased by any county funds. This is all out of my personal budget, and I've got one in each one of my vehicles, and I've got one at my shop, and it's got tourniquets in it. It's got occlusive dressings, so I'm able to, put dressings on things that are non-occlusive, that don't allow air to go through. So if I get shot, or somebody's shot or has a puncture wound in the chest, I can cover that up and keep air from getting down in there, right? So thinking about how you stop trauma. And I carry that with me everywhere, not necessarily just for active shooter events, but because we live out Highway 5, and it's hard to drive down Highway 5 without finding an accident a couple times a week. So think about that, how you put gloves in there, things like that, so that you can maybe help in a situation. Learn how to respond to a few medical things right there, because you never know when you may need to do that. There's Lieutenant Brian Murphy. Like I said, he got shot 15 times. Now, let's look at Virginia Tech just a little bit. That's for the campus of Virginia Tech, and the shooting happened at Norris Hall. Kind of a rock-looking concrete structure. This all happened on the second floor. Cinder block walls, hard polished floors, and you can kind of see what the windows look like there, all right? This is a diagram of how everything was laid out in terms of classes. The shooting started there at the top of the screen in room 206, all right? Students are sitting in class. A couple of things. Remember how I said sometimes they broadcast? Well, there was a faculty member that found a note on campus earlier that day that alluded to the threat that somebody was going to shoot, and they didn't take it seriously. They thought it was a joke. Turned out not to be. You know, how much I would not want to live with myself knowing that. So if you find something like that, or you see something that causes you concern, say something to somebody in the authorities, and let's give us the opportunity to go check it out. So the gunman comes into first floor, chains the doors together like Ms. Anderson said, and he goes into room 206 and starts walking through that classroom shooting people. All right, presumably now everybody's heard that on the second floor that somebody's shooting, okay? They hear what's going on in room 211. Room 211 is where Ms. Anderson is at, and her teacher goes to shut the door, turns around, says, call 911, and the gunman enters. He goes to the far side of the classroom, starts working his way down the aisles, shooting people. Gets to Miss Anderson, shoots her. He leaves room 211 and goes to room 207 next door. Okay? He goes right into room 207 and does much the same thing that he did in room 211. Okay? Throughout all this, remember, they're hearing this gunfire go on the second floor there at Virginia Tech, at Norris Hall. There's a professor in room 204 named Librescu, and Professor Librescu was a survivor of the Holocaust. He was a Jewish professor that survived the Holocaust in the concentration camps, and he ordered his students to start getting out of that room through the windows. Even though it was a second floor, send them out the windows, all right? While he held the door closed with his body. The gunman went to the door, fired several shots through the door, struck Professor Librescu, entered the room, finished off Professor Librescu. There were 6 students that remained in room 204. Of the 6 students that remained in 204, 4 of them were shot and 2 of them died. Through all of this going on, the folks in room 205, they decided that they would brace the door. They would deny them access to room 205. And so they held the door of room 205 closed with their bodies. The gunman came across the hallway, fired multiple rounds through that door, did not strike anyone, okay? The casualties that were in room 207, the students, even though they had been shot, decided that they were going to try to brace room 207's door closed to keep somebody from coming back into the room. That was a good decision, because the gunman then came down and tried to re-enter room 207 and shoot the students he had already shot again, okay? He fired through the door again, did not strike anyone else the second time, and was not able to re-enter room 207. At that point, he goes back down to room 211, where he had unfettered access to that room again, and went back through the room, shooting people that he identified as still alive in room 211. And that's where Christina Anderson was shot another 2 times. Okay, After that, he committed suicide in front of room 211. So when we look at the casualties, about 90% of the students were shot in room 206 where the shooting started, okay? Very high casualty numbers. About 75% of those students succumbed to those injuries. In room 211, 100% of the students were shot in room 211, and about 75% of casualties in that room. In room 207, the number of students were shot the first time was fairly high. Most of the students in that room were shot, but you see the red numbers, our casualties, the number of people that actually died in that room, went down a lot because he was not able to regain access to that room. Okay, using a handgun, not as many people died because he wasn't able to regain access back to that room. In 204, the percentage of students in that room that were shot went down dramatically because they denied that shooter access to that room for at least a limited amount of time. Okay, and we had 2 students that died in room 204. And Professor Lebrescu. And those are the numbers for room 205. Nobody was shot, no one was killed in 205. That's one case study that just shows that denying people access to this can save lives. While you're looking for emergency exits or other ways. You're not helpless, and what you do matters a great deal. So this is just kind of the thought process here. This is the game plan. You know, so if an attack starts, is there a primary exit available? If so, leave, right? Avoid the situation if you can do so. Try to get others out if at all possible. If not, then start trying to deny that shooter to get access to your location while you're looking for alternative exits to get out of that place, okay? If the other exits are not available to avoid the situation, then we have to start thinking about how we defend ourselves and being prepared to fight through that situation, right? Resist that problem, okay? That's the thought process. Look for ways out, deny the access to us, and then be prepared to defend. Okay, this is going to show when the police arrive. This was at that same school board meeting in Panama City.
Everybody on the ground, where's he at? We are on the ground. On the ground. On the ground, please. Hey, everybody on the ground. Let's go. Where's he at? Where's he at? Single seven. I shot him. Anybody else injured? No. Everybody's okay.
Show us your hands, that sort of thing. Okay? This is our priority of work. This is what we're doing when we're there. Our number one priority is to stop the killing. We have to solve the problem first. That's really hard. It's really hard for men and women in law enforcement to know that that's the number one priority. Because what that means is if you're laying down on the ground bleeding out and dying, we have to step over you and move further into that structure in order to go stop the problem. It's against everything in our being to want to step over somebody that's hurting, a hurting victim, and move past them. But that's what we have to do. Because it's like fixing a leak in your sink. And it doesn't make sense to go grab towels and start mopping up the water until we've shut the water off. Does that make sense? And so that's our priority work. We're going to go solve the problem first. We're going to isolate that person. We're going to distract that person, and then we're going to solve the problem. We're going to neutralize it. All right? Our next priority is then stop the dying. Start getting these tourniquets on. Start trying to save lives. Maybe even make use of some of you guys to hey, put your knee here, put direct pressure there so that we can try to start stabilizing some of those folks and then evacuating the area, getting people out of there in order to get you home safe. Follow all the commands that we're given. Show us your palms. Don't move. Understand that we're probably going to put you in handcuffs. Don't worry. They've invented such thing as a handcuff key, and they can come right back off. I promise. We'll figure it out. All right? But we just don't know. You probably know more about that situation than we do. Work with us there. No matter what we tell you to do that. All right? I hear a lot about, well, I've got my concealed carry. I'm going to move through that structure, and I'm going to find, and this is, again, into Nathan speak. This is not part of the lecture. But I'm going to move through that structure, and I'm going to find that bad guy, and I'm going to take him out. I appreciate the nobility of that sentiment. I really, really do. But understand what I've said already, that the police are going to show up in 3 minutes. And when the police show up, we're looking for people that are armed, actively looking for other people hunting in a structure, okay? Bad things can happen in that regard. What I would rather see you do is get people on the phone with 911. Hey, I'm in room 204 or wherever I'm at, right? I've got a concealed carry, there's a concealed carry licensee that's in here with me, and we've got a gun. So just understand that those deputies that are showing up, room 204, it's got a good guy with a gun in it, okay? So they can start at least trying to get that information to those officers that are responding in there. And frankly, I'd rather fight from the defense than I'd rather fight on the offense anyway, right? It's not a good thing to have to go into a room in order to find a bad guy, in order to solve that problem. So take advantage of that situation. Make those bad guys come to you, right? You've got a huge advantage by making them come through a doorway where you know they're coming. So take advantage of that. When the police arrive, I would not have a firearm in my hand, if at all possible. Like I said, follow their commands. Follow their commands at all times. Can good guys get shot? Can armed good guys get shot in all this? Yep, they do. And I wish I could tell you that there's a great way to keep that from happening, but that's just reality, guys. Cops get shot too by other cops. That's just the real world that we live in. And there's ways to prevent it. Like I said, getting on the phone with 911, communicating with people. If I've solved the problem, let's say you've done the right thing. You've shot the bad guy. You're going to be the hero for the day. Well, get on the phone with 911. Tell them where you're at. Send somebody else out to the front door to meet the police, so that when they show up, they're saying, hey, there's a good guy, and he's wearing a black shirt and tan pants, and he's in room 204 down there. Just understand he's a good guy. You know, I start setting those layers of protection out there so that you can try to communicate with the police and let them know, hey, this is what's going on, to try to prevent some of that fratricide. But it can happen. I wish, we're trained first to do a total body response, or total body scan. Who is that person? What's their demeanor look like? We got to size you up in an instant. And then the next thing we're looking at is hands. And if there's something in your hands that could potentially hurt us, that's what we're concerned about. So show your hands, don't move, be prepared to follow commands. We talked about the EMS delay. Again, that's what that medical response training is going to happen. We're changing our tactics a little bit in terms of how medical responds to these situations. It used to be that we would get the scene completely safe, and then we would send in the medical folks. We don't have time for that anymore. We realize that the longer we wait, the more people are going to die from these events. And so we still have to stop the killing, but when it comes time to stop the dying, we're going to pair up officers with our medical responders, and we're taking them into warm zones. Maybe we haven't looked for some second shooter that may or may not exist. Maybe we haven't swept the whole area for bombs, but we're going to roll the dice, and we're going to get in there with medical personnel as quick as we possibly can in order to try to save as many lives as possible. But there is some delay, and we're going to need your help. So again, seek medical first responder training. It goes without saying that these are life-changing events for people. There's going to be a lot of medical or mental trauma that's just part of that, and you've got to think through those plans and develop that stress management plan. Got this slide, one more, and then I'm wrapping up. You've heard me mention names like Christina Anderson tonight, Professor Lebrescu. You've heard me mention Patty Nielsen. You've heard me talk about these victims and these people that were involved in these situations. And you've not heard me mention the name of one of these murderers that have come out and done this to these communities. And it's not because I don't know their names, but we're not going to name them. And I would encourage you to not make these people famous either, because that's what they're after. They're after the fame, they're after the attention. So take that from them. Learn the names of these victims. Learn if you need to learn names, but we don't need to know the names of these people that have done this. Okay? And so law enforcement, we will provide those names to the media. We understand that there's information that is to be gained from knowing who these people were and what their backgrounds are, and people want to know that information. We will provide that information to the media, but you will not hear us stand behind a podium and say their name over and over again. It's not going to happen. So don't name them. We're not going to name them. So tonight we talk a little bit about disaster response psychology. We talk a little bit about avoid, deny, and defend in that program. We looked at a little bit about Virginia Tech. We talked a little bit about EMS delay and encouraging you to seek medical response training. And that's really the program. That's my last slide to share with tonight. I'll take just a couple of questions. At this time, you guys are welcome to be dismissed, but if you've got a couple of questions I can answer real quick, I'd be glad to do so before I get you out of here. Are there any questions? Yes, sir. That's it. I can't recommend any. There are numerous companies that are out there that are doing church security stuff, and it is a very complex issue. But as a public servant, I can't recommend any particular company. But they are out there and they're doing that. I will say that a lot of that training is very good, and it's worth seeking out. What I'll tell you as church leaders is to think about the complexity of the issue, not just from a how to deal with an active shooter situation, but make a phone call to your insurance companies and find out how, if a church security person does something that's either right or maybe even wrong, makes a good call or a bad call, and it doesn't even necessarily have to deal with a shooting. You know, let's say that church security person, meaning well, lays their hands on somebody, and then that somebody decides to go down to the local police department and file a complaint on them. Whose attorney's going to represent them? Okay, that really happens. That really happens. And so think about how that's going to happen, because I would think that you'd want to represent your volunteers, and your volunteers may not want to be volunteers if they think about, wait a minute, they can come after my home because somebody gets up. I mean, that's just the litigious society that we live in anymore. So think about that. Make a call to your insurance companies for the leadership to find out, hey, if my church security folks get in a bind, do y'all cover legal services for them? So think about that, but I can't recommend. I think that there's an organization, a nonprofit organization called Stop the Bleed that does some medical training. I would look into that, but most of that training has to be done under the supervision of a physician, and then when you start getting into that, you start getting into the private stuff, and I can't make the recommendation, unfortunately. Appreciate the question. Any other questions for me real quick before I wrap up? Well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say so. Well, guys, yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Well, sure. So what you're referring to is Act 746 that was passed in 2013. And I haven't been given any specific guidance in order to be able to stand up in here and tell you one way or the other for that. What I'll tell you in general is that decision has been looked at by the Attorney General of the state of Arkansas, and she has put out some opinions on there. And the Attorney General's opinions are very different than Nathan's opinions or any of our private citizens' opinions, because it's weighed very heavily in terms of our judges and how they try different cases. Ultimately, it rests with the individual prosecutors right now and how they're going to look at that situation. What I would tell you, and this is my opinion and not anybody else's, is that open carry appears to me to be legal in the state. However, it does not mean that you may not find yourself running afoul of other laws, disorderly conduct, criminal trespass, problems with the Gun-Free School Zone Act. You know, there are other things, and that's just me as a normal layperson looking at this. But I can't speak to that. I would refer you to, if you're here in Lonoke County, refer to Chuck Graham in his office and see how they act. The guidance that I've kind of heard through the grapevine, and I've not been told anything officially, is just, look at the situation and make your best decision. I've run into folks that have been open carrying at Cabot Fest in Cabot. I knew them from my shop, and I knew they weren't a problem, but I stood around just to help other citizens that were walking around know that, hey, yeah, law enforcement's aware of it, and those guys were great. I don't personally have any problem with open carry. I don't know that it's the best decision, personally, but it's up to that individual, and And I certainly respect people's constitutional rights to be able to do as the Constitution allows them to. Yes, sir.
I specifically asked Chuck Graham about that, and he said the law wasn't clear, but the law is clear on the concealed permit. On the concealed permit, you have to keep it concealed. If you carry it open, you won't remove your concealed permit because you're violating the concealed permit. So if you want open carry, there's no problem.
The comment was made that if you're openly carrying while carrying a concealed carry license, you risk losing your concealed carry license. What I will say is that right now we're in kind of a unique period where we're in a draft rules are changing right now from the Arkansas State Police, and these as it relates to the new enhanced carry law that's going into effect in January, or it's in effect now, but for all practical purposes in January. When they came out to us in draft form as concealed carry instructors, we looked at it, we went through a period of public comment. They then took those rules back, and they're back to the drawing board looking through, making a few changes here and there. One of the things that I read in those draft rules was that there were some provisions that were going to be made for kind of an incidental exposure. So, you know, you're at Walmart, you're reaching up there on the top shelf, and somebody saw your gun. That's not going to cause you to lose your concealed carry license, is what it seems to be that they're trying to say. But the Attorney General did write in her opinion that something about, you know, hey, look, if it looks like if you're concealed carrying, you've agreed to conceal, and open carrying you could potentially lose your license. I think I've read that too. That's what he said that Chuck Graham said. What I would tell you to do, I'm not going to tell you whether to open carry or not. I will say is if you choose to open carry, please understand you need to get a bunch of extra training in terms of weapon retention, and just think through the tactical advantages and disadvantages that may be associated with that. So, yes, sir. And the very back in the sound booth, you guys have been helping me. The enhanced classes will not begin anywhere in the state until at very earliest January 1st, because every concealed carry licensed instructor in the state of Arkansas, whether they want to teach enhanced carry or not, has to take a test again on the enhanced carry provisions from the state police. So we got to all go down there to take a test sometime between January and March of 2018. And if we don't pass that test on the enhanced carry stuff, then we cannot be regular concealed carry instructors either. So that's the way that our legislature wrote that law. And so every concealed carry instructor must offer both regular and enhanced carry classes because it said shall issue. I was personally on the phone screaming about that change, but that's what made it into the code. And so that's what it is. So it will be at least January, if not February or March, before anybody really starts offering those classes. Yes, sir. Yes, yeah, I mean, it's going to be an 8-hour class. The state mandated that it's an additional 8 hours worth of training. And, you know, an instructor basically can charge whatever they need to in order to be able to cover that. Now, in terms of state fees, I've not heard, in the draft rules that came out, there was no mention of additional state fees associated with taking your license from a regular license to an enhanced license. You have to have a regular concealed carry license before you can enhance it, but there was no mention of additional fees or anything associated with that. That may change in the next draft rules that come, or the next rules come out. Yes, sir. Just one second. I'm sorry. I'm gonna grab this guy here. Sounds like the same question. Great. So what enhancing the license is going to do is going to allow people with a concealed handgun license to carry inside university campus buildings where they're currently not allowed to carry. It's going to allow them to carry into churches with or without the permission of the church making the decision making ability, unless there's a sign posted. It's going to allow people to carry into bars, establishments that serve alcohol, unless they put a sign out, and it's going to allow you to carry into state offices. Okay, and I'm sorry. Well, department stores are currently legal to carry into with a concealed carry license, no problem with that, unless they put a sign up. And again, if that business had ever decides to put a sign up or tell you, hey, you can't come in here, you just can't carry in there. Great question. In the back. So to be sure, so to be clear, earlier this year the enhanced carry law passed, all right? And so that law technically went into effect on September the 1st, I believe it was, in September of this year. And what it says is if you get the enhanced license, then you will be able to carry into a church without the church's permission unless they've posted a sign. As the law currently is with a regular concealed handgun license, you can carry into a church, but only with the church's permission. So, and I say church, it's church or other place of worship. So if you've gotten permission from the church and it's okay, you're welcome to carry there. If they have not given you permission, you are not allowed to carry in that church or other place of worship as it stands right now, unless you get the enhanced license, which, does that make sense? Any other questions, guys? I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I see some folks leaving. I understand. I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you so much for listening to me for so long this evening. I appreciate it. If there's anything ever I can do for you, please let me know. And I am going to stay right up here as long as we have questions, because I definitely appreciate the opportunity to answer any of them. So thank you very much.